I never thought I would end up in a legal battle with my own homeowners association over a pole barn. But here I was, sitting in my truck watching 3 HOA board members loading their supplies out of my property in the middle of a January blizzard. My name is Xavier Brooks, and I own a 20-acre property just outside Kalispell, Montana, where winters are brutal and people generally respect each other's property. Generally. It all started back in September when I finished construction on my heated pole barn. The structure was massive, about 3,000 square feet, with concrete floors, full insulation, and a commercial-grade heating system that could keep the interior at a comfortable 65 degrees, even when it was 20 below outside. I had built it primarily for my woodworking business and vehicle restoration projects, but I also knew it would serve as perfect storage during the harsh Montana winters. About 2 weeks after I got the final inspection approval, I received a visit from Angela Morrison, the president of our HOA. She was exactly what you would picture when someone says, HOA president. A woman in her late 40s with that particular haircut that seemed standard issue for people who enjoyed telling others what to do. She drove up in her white Lexus SUV, picking her way across my gravel driveway in heels that had no business being on a working property. Xavier, she called out as I emerged from the barn, wiping sawdust off my hands. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Just working, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I had dealt with Angela before over minor issues like the height of my fence and the color of my mailbox. She had a talent for finding problems where none existed. That's quite a building you have here. She walked closer, eyeing the barn with an expression I couldn't quite read. Very impressive. Heated too, I heard. Yes, madam. Keeps me working through winter. She nodded slowly, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. You know, the HOA has been looking for storage space. We have all this equipment, supplies for neighborhood maintenance, holiday decorations, that sort of thing. Currently, we're renting a unit in town for $200 a month, and it's not even climate controlled. I should have seen it coming. I should have said no right then and there. But Angela had this way of making things sound reasonable, and I figured a little extra income through the winter wouldn't hurt. How much space are we talking about? I asked. Oh, not much. Maybe 500 square feet, a corner of your barn. We would be willing to pay you the same rate we're paying for the storage unit. $200 a month, November through March. 5 months, $1,000 total. Easy money for you, and it helps the community. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds too long. $200 a month isn't quite fair for heated space. I'm paying a fortune to keep this place warm. $300 then, Angela said quickly. $1,500 for the winter season. We'll have everything out by April 1st. $300 a month for basically doing nothing did sound good. My heating bills were going to be high anyway, whether someone was storing stuff in the corner or not. All right, I said, but I'll need it in writing. A proper rental agreement. Of course. I'll have our HOA secretary draw something up. Very professional, very official. That was my first mistake, believing that Angela Morrison and professionalism went hand in hand. The written agreement arrived a week later. It was surprisingly thorough, outlining the rental period from November 1st through March 31st, the monthly payment of $300 due on the 1st of each month, and specifying that the HOA would have access to approximately 500 square feet of space in the northeast corner of my barn. I would provide them with a key and they could access it during reasonable hours. I signed it, Angela signed it, and I filed my copy away. November 1st came around, and right on schedule, Angela showed up with 2 other HOA board members, Cynthia and Robert. They had a truck loaded with an absurd amount of stuff. What started as just some equipment and decorations turned into landscaping tools, lawn mowers, 2 snow blowers, tables, chairs, and approximately 40 plastic storage bins filled with who knows what. "This looks like more than 500 square feet worth of stuff," I said, watching them unload. "Oh, it all stacks up nicely," Angela assured me. "Don't worry, we measured everything." I watched them pile things higher and higher in the corner. It probably was technically within the 500 square foot footprint, just stacked about 8 feet tall. I let it go. The first payment came on time. Angela handed me a check for $300 on November 2nd. "See," she said, "told you this would be easy." December 1st came and went. No payment. On December 5th, I called Angela. "Hey, I haven't received this month's rent yet." "Oh goodness, it must have slipped my mind with the holidays coming up. I'll drop it off tomorrow." Tomorrow came and went. So did the next day and the next week. On December 10th, I sent her a formal email, copying the other board members. "Per our rental agreement, December rent of $300 is now overdue. Please remit payment at your earliest convenience." Angela responded that same evening. "Xavier, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. The HOA has had some unexpected expenses this quarter. The entrance gate needed repairs, and we had that issue with the retention pond. We're a little tight on funds right now. Can we possibly defer this month and pay you double in January? It would really help us out." Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was almost Christmas. I was feeling charitable, and I figured 2 months of patience wasn't going to kill me. I should have known better. January came with a vengeance. Montana winters are not gentle, and this one seemed determined to prove it. Temperatures dropped to 15 below zero, and the snow piled up in drifts that reached the roof of my truck. My heating system was running constantly, and my utility bills reflected it. That first week of January, my electric bill alone was over $600. January 1st passed. No payment. January 5th, still nothing. On January 7th, I drove over to Angela's house, a pristine colonial-style home in the nicest part of our development. She answered the door in a bathrobe, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Xavier, what are you doing here so early? It's 8 in the morning." "It's about the rent, Angela. You owe me $600 now, and I haven't seen a penny since November." She sighed dramatically. "Can we please discuss this at a more reasonable time? I haven't even had my coffee yet." "When would be reasonable? You've been avoiding my calls and emails for a week." "I'm not avoiding anything. Look, we'll discuss this at the next HOA meeting. It's scheduled for January 15th. Can you please just be patient until then?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to demand payment right there, but I also didn't want to be the neighborhood jerk who harassed people at their doorsteps at 8 in the morning, even if I was completely in the right. "Fine. January 15th. "But I want to check that night, Angela, all $600. "Of course," she said, already closing the door. "See you then." The HOA meeting was held at the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. I arrived exactly at 7, the scheduled start time. There were about 20 homeowners scattered around the room, most of them looking as thrilled to be there as people at the DMV. Angela sat at a table in the front with the other board members, papers spread out before her. The meeting droned on for 45 minutes, covering the most mind-numbing topics imaginable. Someone's fence was 2 inches too tall. Someone else had parked their RV on the street for more than the allowed 24 hours. The neighborhood entrance needed new flowers planted in the spring. Finally, during the new business section, I raised my hand. "Yes, Xavier," Angela said, her tone suggesting she had been hoping I would stay silent. "I'd like to discuss the outstanding rental payment for the barn space. According to our agreement, I should have received $600 by now, and I haven't been paid since November." A murmur went through the room. Several people looked confused, clearly unaware of the rental arrangement. Angela cleared her throat. "Yes. Well, as I mentioned to you privately, the HOA has had some unexpected expenses. We're working on the budget to accommodate this. Our agreement doesn't say anything about delaying payment based on budget issues. The rent is due on the 1st of each month, and it's now the 15th. Cynthia, one of the other board members, leaned forward. "Xavier, we appreciate you trying to help the community by providing storage space, but you have to understand that HOA funds are finite. We have to prioritize based on what benefits the most homeowners." I felt my blood pressure rising. "I'm not asking for charity. We have a signed contract. This isn't a favor I'm doing. It's a rental agreement that both parties are legally obligated to honor." "There's no need to get hostile," Angela said, using that patronizing tone that made me want to throw something. "We'll figure out the payment situation. Perhaps we can negotiate a reduced rate going forward, given the community benefit this provides." "I'm not negotiating anything. You owe me $600 and next month you'll owe me $900. Pay what you owe, or I'll start eviction proceedings." Angela actually laughed. "Eviction? Don't be dramatic. Where exactly do you think we're going to move everything in the middle of winter? You're being unreasonable." That was it. That was the moment I decided I was done being nice. "You have until January 25th to pay me in full." "That's $600. If I don't have it by then, I'm changing the locks and you can retrieve your belongings when you pay me what you owe. This isn't a negotiation." I walked out of that meeting knowing I had made enemies, but I didn't care. I was tired of being pushed around by people who thought the rules didn't apply to them. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Simmons, and she specialized in property law and contract disputes. I met with her in her office in downtown Kalispell, a cozy space filled with law books and the smell of coffee. "Let me see the contract," she said after I explained the situation. I handed her my copy of the rental agreement. She read through it carefully, nodding occasionally. "This is pretty straightforward. They're in clear breach of contract. You're absolutely within your rights to pursue eviction." "What's the process?" "In Montana, for a rental situation like this, you need to provide written notice. Since they're behind on rent, you can give them what's called a 3-day notice to pay or quit. If they don't comply, you can proceed with a formal eviction. However, there's a wrinkle." "What's that?" "They're not a typical tenant. This is the HOA, which you're presumably a member of. Things might get messy from a community standpoint. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Angela's laugh at the meeting, her dismissive attitude, the way she had strung me along for weeks. "Yes, I'm prepared." "All right then. Let me draft the notice. We'll have it delivered by certified mail and also hand-delivered, so there's no question they received it." The 3-day notice was delivered on January 18th. It was formal, legal, and very clear. The HOA had 72 hours to pay the $600 owed or vacate the premises. If they failed to comply, I would change the locks, and they could only retrieve their belongings by paying the full amount owed plus any additional rent that came due. Angela called me within an hour of receiving the notice. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times that day. Each time I let it go to voicemail. Finally, she left a message. Her voice had lost all its false sweetness. "Xavier, this is absolutely ridiculous. You can't just evict the HOA. That's not how this works. We're trying to work with you and you're being completely inflexible. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults." I didn't call her back. Instead, I forwarded her message to Patricia, my lawyer. On January 20th, the 3-day deadline passed. I received no payment, no communication beyond those voicemails, nothing. That afternoon, I contacted a locksmith and had the locks changed on every door to my barn. I installed a new security system with cameras covering every angle of the building. If they tried to access their stuff without paying, I would have it on video. The phone calls started immediately. Angela, Cynthia, Robert, and several other HOA members all called, each more agitated than the last. I didn't answer any of them. My lawyer had advised me to keep all communication through her office, and that's exactly what I did. On January 23rd, I received a letter from the HOA's lawyer, some guy named Martin Fletcher from a firm in Missoula. The letter claimed I was in breach of the rental agreement by denying access, that I was holding their property hostage, and that they would pursue legal action if I didn't immediately provide access and agree to a revised payment schedule. Patricia laughed when I showed it to her. They don't have a leg to stand on. They breached first by not paying. Your response to their breach is legally sound. Let me respond to Mr. Fletcher. Her response was beautiful in its simplicity. She laid out exactly how the HOA had breached the contract, noted that I had followed proper eviction procedures under Montana law, and stated that access would be granted as soon as full payment was received. She also included a calculation of what was now owed: $600 for November and December, $300 for January, and an additional $50 per day storage fee for any property remaining after January 31st. It was all perfectly legal based on the terms of our original contract, which included a clause about fees for property left beyond the agreed-upon terms. January turned into a game of chicken. The HOA refused to pay, apparently convinced I would cave. I refused to budge, perfectly content to let their stuff sit in my barn while the fees accumulated. My security cameras showed Angela and Robert driving by my property several times, presumably hoping to catch me off guard so they could somehow access the barn. It didn't work. The weather continued to be brutally cold. Several more snowstorms rolled through, and by the end of January, we had received over 4 feet of snow. The temperature hadn't gotten above 20 degrees in weeks. My heating bills were astronomical, which only made me more determined to get what I was owed. On February 1st, I sent an updated invoice through my lawyer. The HOA now owed me $900 in rent plus $50 for January 31st, bringing the total to $950. For every day in February they didn't pay, that number would climb by $50. Finally, on February 4th, I got a different kind of response. Martin Fletcher, the HOA's lawyer, called Patricia and requested a meeting. Not with me directly. He wanted to negotiate. I'll be there, I told Patricia. But I'm not negotiating the amount. They pay what they owe or their stuff stays locked up. The meeting was scheduled for February 7th at a neutral location, a conference room at the public library in Kalispell. When I arrived, I found Martin Fletcher, Angela Morrison, Robert, and Cynthia all sitting on one side of a long table. Patricia and I took seats across from them. Martin spoke first. He was a man in his 60s with white hair and an expensive suit. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for agreeing to meet. I think we can resolve this situation amicably." "I'm listening," I said. "My clients acknowledge that payments have been missed. However, they believe the fees you're charging are excessive and potentially punitive. They're willing to pay the base rent owed, $900 for November through January, but they contest the daily storage fees." I looked at Patricia, who opened her folder and pulled out our contract. The storage fees are explicitly outlined in Section 7 of the rental agreement, which both parties signed. If the renter fails to remove property by the end date of the rental period, they agree to pay $50 per day for continued storage. Since the HOA is in breach of contract and has not paid rent, causing them to forfeit their rental rights, their property is now being stored beyond the rental period. The fees are valid. Angela leaned forward. Xavier, please be reasonable. The HOA is a non-profit organization. We don't have unlimited funds. We're trying to maintain and improve the community for everyone's benefit, including yours. Then you should have thought about that before signing a contract you couldn't afford to honor, I said. This has nothing to do with community benefit. You took advantage of my property, didn't pay me what you owed, and laughed in my face when I asked for my money. Now you're facing the consequences. We didn't take advantage of anyone, Cynthia protested. We had legitimate cash flow issues. That's not my problem. You entered into a legal agreement. Honor it. Martin tried a different approach. Mr. Brooks, if this goes to court, it's going to be expensive for everyone involved. Legal fees will far exceed what's owed. Wouldn't it be simpler to accept the base rent and forego the additional fees? Everyone walks away, problem solved. I'm not the one who would be paying legal fees to get my own property back, I pointed out. Your clients would. They're the ones with everything to lose here. I'm perfectly happy to let their lawn mowers and Christmas decorations sit in my barn indefinitely while the fees pile up. Angela's face turned red. This is extortion. No, this is business. You want your stuff back. Pay me what you owe. Current total is $1,000. Tomorrow it will be $1,050. The day after, $1,100. Your choice. The meeting ended badly. Angela stormed out, muttering about how I was destroying the community. Robert and Cynthia followed her, both looking defeated. Martin Fletcher lingered for a moment. Mr. Brooks, off the record, you're probably going to win if this goes to court, but you should know that Angela Morrison doesn't like to lose. She's going to make your life difficult. She's been making my life difficult for 2 years, I said. I'm not worried. Over the next week, Angela made good on Martin Fletcher's warning. I started receiving violation notices from the HOA. My fence, which had been fine for 2 years, was suddenly too tall. My mailbox was the wrong color. My driveway had weeds growing in the cracks. My garbage cans were visible from the street. Every single notice came with a threat of fines if the violations weren't corrected within 30 days. I forwarded every single notice to Patricia. Is this harassment? I asked. Borderline, she said. But it's also typical behavior for someone like Angela. She's trying to pressure you into backing down. Document everything, but don't engage. Let her dig her own hole. On February 10th, something interesting happened. I received a call from David Chen, one of the homeowners in the development. I knew him vaguely. He lived a few streets over, and we occasionally waved at each other while getting mail. Xavier, I heard about what's going on with the HOA and your barn, he said. I wanted you to know that a lot of us think you're doing the right thing. Angela has been abusing her position for years, and it's about time someone stood up to her. I appreciate that, David. I'm just trying to get paid for services rendered. Well, there's more to it than that now. A bunch of us have been talking, and we're concerned about how the HOA is spending money. If they can't afford $300 a month for legitimate storage, where is all our dues money going? We pay $200 a month each. With 75 homes in this development, that's $15,000 a month. Where's it all going? That was a very good question. I hadn't thought about it from that angle, but David was right. The HOA should have had plenty of money for a small rental payment. I don't know, I admitted. I just know they owe me money and won't pay. Would you be willing to speak at the next HOA meeting? Some of us want to call for a financial audit and possibly remove Angela from the board. Your situation is a perfect example of why we need better oversight. I thought about it. Getting involved in HOA politics was the last thing I wanted, but if it helped get me paid and removed Angela from power, maybe it was worth it. When's the meeting? February 20th. Will you be there? I'll be there. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable over the next week and a half. I heard through the grapevine that Angela had gotten wind of the planned rebellion at the meeting and was scrambling to shore up support. She was calling homeowners, trying to paint me as the villain, claiming I was trying to bankrupt the HOA over a minor disagreement. On February 15th, I received a formal notice from the HOA that I was being fined $500 for various violations of community standards. The notice listed 10 different violations, most of them absurdly petty. My house numbers were mounted half an inch too far from the door frame. There was a small oil stain on my driveway. My front door was a shade of blue that wasn't on the approved color list, even though it had been that color when I bought the house 2 years ago. Patricia reviewed the notice and shook her head. This is definitely retaliation. In Montana, HOAs have broad authority, but this is excessive. We can fight these if we need to, but I think it's better to wait. Let them keep acting unreasonably. It only strengthens your position. So I just take it, for now, but document everything. Take photos showing that most of these violations are either fabricated or were pre-existing conditions when you bought the property. We're building a case. February 20th arrived with another massive snowstorm. The weather forecast was calling for a foot of new snow and wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. It was the kind of night where anyone with sense stayed home. Of course, that didn't stop people from coming to the HOA meeting. The community center was packed. I had never seen so many homeowners at one of these things. Usually, Angela was lucky to get 10 people to show up. Tonight, there had to be at least 50 people crammed into the room. The energy was tense. Angela sat at her usual spot at the front table, but she looked rattled. Cynthia and Robert flanked her, both looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. David Chen sat in the front row, along with several other homeowners I recognized. The meeting started with standard business, but Angela rushed through it quickly, clearly wanting to get to the main event. When she opened the floor for new business, David immediately stood up. "I'd like to call for a financial audit of the HOA accounts," he said clearly. "I've been reviewing our bylaws, and any homeowner can request an audit with support from 10% of the membership. I have signatures from 15 homeowners here tonight requesting a full, independent audit of all HOA finances for the past 3 years. He walked up and handed Angela a document. She took it, her face pale. "This is highly irregular." "It's completely within our rights according to the bylaws you're supposed to be following," David said. "We want to know where our money is going. If the HOA can't afford to pay a $300 monthly expense, something is wrong." Another homeowner stood up. "I also want to know why Xavier Brooks is being fined $500 for violations that either don't exist or have existed since before he moved here. That seems like retaliation to me." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Angela's face flushed. "Mr. Brooks is being fined because he is in violation of community standards. This has nothing to do with the rental dispute." "Really?" I stood up. "Because I've lived here for 2 years without any complaints until I tried to get you to pay me money you owe me. Now suddenly my house is a disaster of violations. You're out of order, Mr. Brooks. No, you're out of order. You owe me money. As of today, February 20th, you owe me $1,700, $900 in unpaid rent, and $800 in storage fees for the 20 days in February. Your stuff has been sitting in my barn taking up space you're not paying for. That number goes up $50 every single day until you pay me." "That's extortion," Angela shouted. "That's the contract you signed," I shot back. "Every number I just quoted is from the agreement you put your signature on. If you thought the terms were unfair, you shouldn't have signed it." Patricia, who had come with me to the meeting, stood up. "I'm Patricia Simmons, Mr. Brooks's attorney. I have copies of the rental agreement here for anyone who wants to review it. Everything my client has done is completely legal and appropriate. The HOA breached the contract, and they're now facing the consequences outlined in that contract." She walked around the room, handing out copies of the contract. People started reading, and the murmurs got louder. Angela looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. "I move to remove Angela Morrison as HOA president," David said. "She has clearly mismanaged funds, engaged in what appears to be retaliation against a homeowner, and failed to represent the interests of this community." "Second," someone called out. "You can't do this," Angela said, her voice shaking. "There are procedures, there's a process." "The process is right here in the bylaws," David said, holding up a copy. "Any board member can be removed by a vote of the membership present at a meeting, provided proper notice was given. I sent an email to every homeowner 3 days ago stating that tonight's meeting would include a vote on board leadership. That's proper notice." Angela looked at Cynthia and Robert for support. Robert wouldn't meet her eyes. Cynthia just shrugged. "All in favor of removing Angela Morrison as president," David called out. A forest of hands went up. I counted quickly. At least 40 people had voted yes. All opposed. 3 hands went up. Angela's and 2 homeowners I didn't recognize. The motion passes. "Angela, you're removed as president effective immediately." Angela stood up, grabbed her papers, and stormed toward the door. She stopped when she reached my seat and leaned in close. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this community over $1,000. You destroyed your own reputation by not paying your debts," I said quietly. "I just wanted to get paid for my property use." She left. The door slammed behind her, rattling in its frame from the force. The meeting continued with David being elected interim president, and a vote to hire an independent auditor to review all HOA finances. Before the meeting ended, David made an announcement. "I'm authorizing payment to Xavier Brooks of all money owed under the rental agreement, effective immediately. We'll use reserve funds if necessary. The HOA will honor its contracts." A wave of relief washed over me. Finally. But the drama wasn't over yet. The next morning, February 21st, I woke up to my security cameras alerting me to movement at my barn. I pulled up the feed on my phone and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Angela Morrison was there with a bolt cutter, trying to cut the lock off my barn door. I called 911 immediately. "There's someone trying to break into my barn. I have it on video." The dispatcher took my information and said deputies were on the way. I threw on clothes and headed outside. It was freezing, probably 10 below zero, and the wind from last night's storm was still whipping snow around in angry gusts. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I approached. "Angela, what the hell are you doing?" I called out. She spun around, bolt cutters still in her hands. "I'm getting our property. You've held it hostage long enough." "That's breaking and entering. I've already called the police. They're on their way." "I don't care. That's HOA property in there, and you have no right to keep it from us." "I have every right. You didn't pay rent. You got evicted. That's how it works." She took a step toward me, and for a second, I thought she might actually try to hit me with the bolt cutters. Instead, she threw them down in the snow. "You've ruined everything. You understand that. I've been president of this HOA for 6 years. 6 years of my time and effort, and you've destroyed it all. You ruined it yourself by not paying your bills," I said. "The police are going to be here any minute. If I were you, I'd leave." "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't. She stood there in the freezing cold, arms crossed, waiting. I stood there too, about 20 feet away, still recording. It was surreal, this standoff in the middle of a Montana winter morning, snow swirling around us, over a dispute about unpaid rent. The sheriff's deputies arrived about 10 minutes later. 2 vehicles pulled up and 3 deputies got out. I recognized one of them, Deputy Martinez. I had met him at a community safety meeting the previous year. "Mr. Brooks," he said, walking over, "you called about a break-in." "Yes, sir. I have it on video. Miss Morrison here was trying to cut the lock off my barn to access property that's inside." He turned to Angela. "Madam, is that true?" "That's HOA property." "He's holding it hostage." "Madam, I need you to calm down. Can you explain the situation?" Angela launched into a tirade about the rental agreement, the eviction, the HOA board changes, everything. She was nearly hysterical, and her version of events made it sound like I was some kind of criminal mastermind who had orchestrated everything to destroy her. The deputies listened patiently, then turned to me. I pulled out my phone. "I have video of her trying to cut my lock. I also have the rental agreement, the eviction notice, and documentation of everything that's happened. She hasn't paid rent since November. I legally evicted her, and now she's trying to break in." Deputy Martinez looked at the bolt cutters lying in the snow, then at the lock on the barn door, which had clear marks where Angela had been attempting to cut it. "Madam, do you own this property?" "No, but do you have legal authority to access this building?" "The HOA has a rental agreement." "Which she violated by not paying rent," I interjected. "I have the eviction notice here. She was legally evicted on January 25th. The deputy took the documents from me and reviewed them carefully. He walked back to his vehicle and spent several minutes on his radio, presumably checking with someone about the legality of everything. When he came back, his expression was serious. "Madam, you're going to need to come with us." "What? Why?" "You're being detained for attempted burglary and destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as Deputy Martinez read Angela her rights, and another deputy placed her in handcuffs. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, still insisting that she was in the right and I was the criminal. They loaded her into the back of a patrol vehicle and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway wondering how a simple rental agreement had spiraled into criminal charges. The rest of that day was a blur of phone calls and meetings. Patricia assured me that everything I had done was legal and that Angela's arrest was justified. David Chen called to apologize on behalf of the HOA and confirmed that they would have a check for me by the end of the day. True to his word, Robert showed up at my house at 5 in the afternoon with a certified check for $1,700. "I'm sorry about all of this," Robert said, handing me the check. "I should have stood up to Angela months ago. I knew we should have paid you." "Water under the bridge," I said, taking the check. "When do you want to pick up your stuff? Would tomorrow work? I'll rent a truck and bring some people to help load." "That works. Come by around 10. That evening, I deposited the check using my bank's mobile app and felt a tremendous weight lift off my shoulders. I had my money. Angela was facing legal consequences for her actions. The HOA was under new management. Everything had worked out. The next morning, Robert showed up with 4 other homeowners and a rental truck. I opened the barn and helped them load everything. It took about 3 hours to get it all out. When they were done, Robert shook my hand. "Thanks for being reasonable about this," he said. "I know it got ugly." "Yeah, it did. But hey, at least we figured it out eventually. After they left, I stood in my barn looking at the empty corner where the HOA stuff had been. 3,000 square feet of heated space, all mine again. It felt good. The financial audit of the HOA came back in late March. As it turned out, Angela had been mismanaging funds for years. While there was no evidence of outright theft, she had been spending money on unauthorized expenses, mostly things for herself. Landscaping for her own property billed as entrance beautification. New furniture for her house billed as community center furnishing. Expensive dinners billed as board meetings. Over 3 years, she had misappropriated nearly $20,000 in HOA funds. David Chen called me when the audit results came out. We're going to be pursuing legal action against Angela to recover the funds. I wanted you to know since you were part of how this all came to light. I appreciate you telling me. I just wanted to get paid for my barn space, but I'm glad you found this. Your situation made a lot of us start asking questions we should have been asking years ago. So thank you. Angela was charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud related to the HOA funds. Her attempted break-in at my barn ended up being a misdemeanor charge, but combined with the financial crimes, she was facing serious legal consequences. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had hired a criminal defense attorney and was trying to negotiate a plea deal. In April, she pleaded guilty to multiple counts of theft and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 months. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which, given her financial situation, would likely take years. As for me, I went back to my normal life. My woodworking business picked up in the spring, and I spent most of my time in the barn that had caused so much trouble, building furniture and restoring vintage cars. The new HOA board, led by David Chen, was efficient and fair. No more petty violation notices. No more power trips. Just a functional organization doing what it was supposed to do, maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events. One afternoon in May, I was working on a dresser when I heard a vehicle pull up outside. I went to see who it was and found Cynthia, the former HOA board member, standing by her car. "Hi, Xavier," she said, looking nervous. "I hope I'm not bothering you, not at all. What can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. I should have spoken up when Angela was refusing to pay you. I should have stood up to her about a lot of things. I was a coward and you paid the price for that. I wiped sawdust off my hands. "Cynthia, it's okay. I got my money. Everything worked out. Still, I feel terrible. I also wanted you to know that I resigned from the HOA board. I don't think I'm cut out for that kind of responsibility. I just go along with what everyone else says, even when I know it's wrong." "That takes guts to admit," I said. "For what it's worth, I think you learned something from all this. Maybe next time you'll speak up earlier." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Maybe. Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm sorry and thank you for standing your ground. A lot of people benefited from you not backing down, even if it was hard." After she left, I went back to working on the dresser, thinking about everything that had happened. It had started so simply: rent out some space in my barn for extra income over winter. But it had turned into a months-long battle that exposed corruption, ended with someone going to prison, and completely changed the dynamics of our neighborhood. The thing about standing up for yourself is that it's rarely easy. Angela had power and position. She had people who supported her, at least initially. She had the weight of the HOA behind her. But she was wrong and I was right, and sometimes that's all that matters. You have to be willing to endure the pressure, the harassment, the attempts to make you back down. You have to be willing to let things get uncomfortable and messy and difficult. But in the end, it's worth it. Summer came to Montana, and with it came long days and warm weather. The neighborhood had a block party in June, the first one in years according to David. Everyone seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. People were friendlier. There was more trust. The new HOA board published monthly financial statements so everyone could see exactly where their dues were going. It was revolutionary compared to how things had been under Angela's leadership. I ran into Martin Fletcher, the lawyer who had represented the HOA, at a coffee shop in Kalispell one morning in July. He was in line behind me, and we both did that awkward recognition thing where you know each other but aren't sure if you should acknowledge it. "Xavier," he said finally, "how are things?" "Good, Mr. Fletcher. You can't complain. Listen, I wanted to say something. When I was representing the HOA in your dispute, I thought you were being unreasonable. I thought you should have just worked out a payment plan and moved on. But after the audit came out and I learned what Angela had been doing, I realized you were right to stand your ground. If you had backed down, none of that would have come to light. I appreciate you saying that. I wasn't trying to expose corruption or anything. I just wanted to get paid. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person refusing to let things slide. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I respect what you did, even if I was on the other side of it." We shook hands, and I left feeling vindicated in a way I hadn't expected. Even the lawyer who had tried to get me to back down now understood why I couldn't. In August, I got a letter from the Montana Department of Corrections. Angela Morrison had requested to add me to her approved correspondence list. Inmates could write letters to approved people, and apparently, she wanted to write to me. I stared at the form for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted nothing to do with her. She had made my life hell for months. She had tried to break into my property. She had stolen from the HOA. Why would I want to hear from her? But another part of me was curious. What could she possibly have to say? I checked the box approving the correspondence and sent the form back. 3 weeks later, I received a letter. It was written in neat handwriting on prison stationery. I sat on my porch with a beer and opened it. "Dear Xavier," it began. "I'm sure you're surprised to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you if you threw this letter away without reading it, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to say what I need to say. I was wrong. About everything. I should have paid you the rent we agreed on. When I couldn't, I should have been honest instead of making excuses. When you pushed back, I should have found a way to make it right instead of retaliating against you. Instead, I let my pride and my need to be in control destroy everything. I lost my position, my reputation, my freedom. But more than that, I lost my integrity. I justified everything I did by telling myself I was helping the community. The truth is, I was helping myself. The audit showed things I'm deeply ashamed of. I convinced myself that I deserved those things because of all the work I was doing. I was wrong. I'm writing this not because I expect forgiveness or even a response. I'm writing because I need you to know that you were right to stand your ground. If more people had stood up to me over the years, maybe I wouldn't be here now. Maybe I would have learned these lessons before it was too late. I hope things are going well for you. I hope your woodworking business is thriving. I hope you're enjoying that heated barn that caused all this trouble. And I hope you know that, despite everything, you did the right thing. Sincerely, Angela Morrison. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it back in the envelope. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. I filed it with all the other documents from that whole mess. The rental agreement, the eviction notice, the audit report, everything. Evidence of a time when I stood up for myself and discovered that sometimes Doing the right thing means being willing to be the bad guy in someone else's story. Fall came around again, bringing with it the beautiful Montana autumn colors and the promise of another harsh winter ahead. I was better prepared this time. My heating system was serviced and ready. My wood pile was stocked. My barn was all mine, no tenants, no drama, just space for me to work and create. One evening in October, David Chen stopped by. "Hey Xavier, I have a question for you." "Sure, what's up?" "The new HOA board has been talking. We still need storage for our equipment and supplies. Would you be interested in renting space in your barn again? I know it didn't work out great last time, but we'd pay upfront for the whole winter, and we'd put everything in writing even more clearly than before." I laughed. "David, I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm going to keep my barn drama free this winter." "That's fair. Can't blame you at all. But the offer stands if you change your mind." After he left, I walked into my barn and turned on the heat. The familiar hum of the system kicking in was comforting. This space was mine. I had fought for it, defended it, and ultimately proven my right to control what happened here. That was worth more than any rental income. As I stood there in my heated pole barn, surrounded by my tools and projects, I thought about everything that had happened. It had started with what seemed like a simple, reasonable arrangement. A little extra income, helping out the community, everybody wins. But it had taught me valuable lessons about contracts, about standing your ground, about not letting people take advantage of you just because they have a title or position. Angela Morrison was in prison, serving time for her crimes. The HOA was under new management and running smoothly. My barn was my own again. And I had a story that I knew I would be telling for years. The time I evicted the HOA from my heated pole barn in the middle of a Montana winter, and how that one action exposed corruption and changed an entire neighborhood for the better. The temperature outside was dropping as winter approached again. Snow was forecast for next week. But inside my barn, it was warm and comfortable, exactly as I had built it to be. I fired up my table saw and got to work on a new project, a custom bookshelf for a customer in Whitefish. The saw's whine filled the space, drowning out any thoughts of past drama. Life was good. The barn was mine. And I had learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. You just have to be willing to see it through, no matter how cold it gets.